You're listening to School Counseling Simplified, a podcast with easy-to-implement strategies for busy school counselors. Here's your host, Rachel Davis from Bright Futures Counseling.
Hey there! I am so excited to announce my newest project called Impact. I created a membership for school counselors so you can have everything you need for engaging class lessons, small groups, and individual sessions at your fingertips each month. Members receive monthly curated curriculum across 3 tiers, curriculum map and video implementation guides, live bi-weekly Zoom coaching calls with me where you can pick my brain about all things school counseling, and an exclusive members-only Facebook group where you can build community with like-minded school counselors. Sign up today at stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/impact. Impact just launched, so get in early to get maximum benefits. Again, you can get all the details and sign up today at stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/impact. Hey there! Thank you for listening to another episode of School Counseling Simplified. So if you've been listening to the last couple of episodes, then you may know that during the month of March, we were focusing on small groups. So small groups are my favorite part of counseling, and I want to share with you some strategies so they can become your favorite part too. So today I want to talk to you about 2 simple ways that you can collect small group data. So like all things in school counseling, it's great that we're just doing it out of the passion and goodness of our hearts, but we need to have data to back it up. We want to make sure that these interventions we're doing with students are effective, and we want to make sure that improve to other stakeholders like parents, teachers, admins, that when we pull them out of class to come to counseling, that we are measuring what we're doing and we're finding out that it's working. So how do we do that? We collect data. So collecting data kind of sounds intimidating, but it's totally doable. You just need a few systems in place. So the first thing I like to do when it comes to collecting data in small groups is use self-assessments. So a self-assessment, just like the name implies, is that the student themselves is taking the assessment. So this is a pre-group, post-group survey. So there's 2 ways you can do these. So the first way is objective learned. So this is a right or wrong answer that can be answered objectively. So for example, something like, can you name 5 coping strategies? Or I know what a growth mindset is. Or I know who I can talk to when I feel upset, something like that. So that's a yes or no question, right? And the point of these questions is that you're going to come up with them when you're outlining your group. So for example, if I'm doing an anger management group, maybe in session 1, our whole objective for that group is to identify what it means to feel angry and how their body feels when they feel angry. And then maybe in session 2, they're going to learn coping strategies, and maybe in session 3, they're going to learn a support system who can help them when they're feeling angry. So I will have a question per session, at least 1 question per session. So for example, I'll have a question on the self-assessment that says, I know what my body feels like when I am angry. And then a question could say, I can name 3 coping strategies to use when I'm feeling angry. Or I know who I can talk to when I'm feeling angry. So do you see how each of the questions in the self-assessment correspond to a topic or an objective that's going to be learned throughout the group? You may have students who answer a lot of no at the beginning, and that's okay. They're not supposed to know these things yet. That's why they're in the group. So you want to remind them to please answer honestly, and that it's okay. There's no right or wrong answer. You're just assessing how much they know before the group. Then they're going to learn these things, and then after the group, hopefully they'll be able to say yes to all of these. So my self-assessments will have a question, and then it says yes or no, and they simply circle one. A lot of kids say, what if I'm maybe or kind of? Then I just tell them they can circle the word or if they want to. Now, you do want to put your students' names and dates on these. This is super important. And it's funny, I've definitely had the counselor fail before where I have not done this, and then I don't know who answered what, or I don't know which one's the pre-test and which one's the post-test. So be sure that you're staying organized and using student name and dates. And I'll give you a digital strategy for this in a second. But first, we talked about the objective learn. So these are those things you just want to know. Do they know these materials or skills before the group? And then you're going to ask them again, and hopefully it's something they've learned in the group. Now, the second type of question you can include on the self-assessment is a feelings-based question. So a feelings-based question is answered subjectively, and it has no definitive correct answer. So for example, this is more like a rating scale. So I feel sad more often than I feel happy. Or I experience grief every day. Or it's like a feelings-based question that you're just checking in on them with, and you want to do that before the group and after the group to see if their feelings have changed. But again, there is no right or wrong answer, especially if we're talking about something like grief or their coping skills, how one day they may manage their emotions differently than another day. This is more like a feelings check-in. So this data is important to have also. It's not really assessing the effectiveness of your group lessons. It's just assessing the student's state and kind of like a rating scale of their feelings. So those are the feelings-based questions. So you can do one self-assessment where you have a mix of the questions, or you can have two separate ones. One's that's specifically aligned with the objectives, and then one that's just kind of a feelings check-in. So totally up to you there. Now, the digital hack I was going to show you is that I love using Google Forms for these. So I used to use paper forms, but then I made some digital versions when we were doing things virtually. And then I realized, wait, I should just be using the digital versions all the time because these are way easier. So it, have the student's name and date. It'll collect that information, and then they go through and they can just click yes, no, or maybe, or a scale 1 to 5, however you want to set it up on the self-assessment. Then have them go back and do the same one on a post-self-assessment. And you can see it timestamps it in there, has all the information, and it will even organize it for you. You can export it to an Excel sheet or Google sheet and see the data presented in pretty charts and graphs, and it has it all there for you. So that's a super simple way to collect the data. And then all you have to do is screenshot the graphs, throw them in your end of the year report, and that is some small group data collection made easy. So what do you do when you get the results of your self-assessment? So you have all this information, now what? Well, one thing you want to know, one time I had a self-assessment that said, I know what an inner coach is. People answered no, and then the second time, the post-test, it said, I know what an inner coach is. They still answered no. I'm like, well, that's weird. We're talking about growth mindset and inner coach and critic. I go back and look at my lesson plans. I forgot to even introduce the fact about an inner coach. We didn't really touch on it. Or if we did, I said it in passing, and they didn't fully understand what that meant. So it helps you become aware of deficits in your planning or areas you need to spend more time on. Or, maybe there's a concept kids are having a problem with, and you want to stretch it out across 2 sessions instead of 1 session. These are all things that self-assessments can do for you. So the virtual ones you could send to students just to have them fill out on their own time. They could do it outside of the group, and then that way you're not wasting group time. Or you could have them fill it out on computers or on an iPad in your office. Or if you are going to use the paper forms, what I like to do with the little ones, if I have older students, I just pass them out, say, okay, you're going to answer these self-assessments. We have like 2 or 3 minutes to do this. They answer the questions and then turn them in. But with the little guys, sometimes I'll read the questions out loud to them. So it'll say something like, I know I know how to take deep breaths, yes or no. And then they'll answer yes or no. And, they like to keep it confidential and private because you want to encourage them to be honest. So I recommend passing out clipboards and having the kids go to different places in the room with a clipboard so they can answer privately. So you can have the students do that. And then another thing I like to do, because that does take up quite a chunk of time, reading it out loud. So what you could do instead, or even if you have students read them independently, maybe some students are finishing before others and then they're just kind of sitting there. So what you could do instead is start a group activity. So have students work on kind of like a worksheet or some kind of independent work. And then you can call them over one by one and kind of do mini interviews with them. So for example, I would have the kids all sitting at a table working on something, and then I would be sitting at my desk or on the couch and ask students to come over one by one. And then I have a clipboard and I'm kind of asking them the questions like, can you name 3 coping strategies to use the next time you're in the red zone? And then they're saying yes. And this way is actually great because sometimes the kids don't know the answer and they feel weird and they just circle yes even though they don't know. So when you're asking them directly, you can have some follow-up questions And this is a really good way to see how much they actually understand. So those are some tips for implementing self-assessments. Now, the second way that I want to share with you about how to collect small group data is using a behavior progress monitoring survey. So basically, that is just a really long phrase to describe a very simple form. So what a behavior progress monitoring survey is, it's a survey that you're sending to parents and teachers before and after services provided. You could even send one mid-services as well. And you're doing this so they can rate how their child or student is doing. So this could be a rating scale of never, rarely, sometimes, often, and always, or almost always. And then you want to break it down by the group topic. So for example, let's say you're doing a friendship group. This is a paper you would have, and you want to indicate that there's a phase 1 and a phase 2 rating, or a before counseling and after counseling rating. So you want the rater, so that would be the teacher or the parent, to write their name and the date, the student's name, and then their relationship to the student. And then you want them to indicate if this is the before or after phase, or perhaps mid, halfway point phase if you're doing that as well. And then you want them to honestly answer the survey. So these are all about behaviors. So for example, if the topic was friendship, an item on the survey would say cooperates with classmates, or is able to resolve conflicts with peers, or engages in conversations with peers, shows kindness to peers, demonstrates the qualities of a good friend. And then they're going to answer on a scale of never, rarely, sometimes, often, or almost always. So you're going to use this data just like you would the other self-assessments to compare and to see how the students have changed since they've been in your group. So maybe at the beginning of the group, they're getting a lot of never, rarely as answers. And then hopefully after they've learned some skills and practiced implementing them over the course of the group, over 6 to 8 weeks, then hopefully on the phase 2 survey, it's saying often or almost always. And the reason these are helpful is because these are good because this is an outside perspective. So the other one is a student self perspective. So they're assessing their own feelings and own beliefs and knowledge. But this is kind of where proof's in the pudding. We're seeing if they are actually implementing these skills through their behaviors, and if their parents are noticing, and if their teachers are noticing. Because a student may say, yes, I feel like I know 3 coping strategies, but maybe they're not being honest because they just want to feel like they're getting it right, or maybe they think they know them, but maybe they're not actually practicing them and implementing them. So this is a great way to see how the actual behaviors are affected and if there has been an improvement in behavior. These are also great because this shows parents and teachers that you're collecting data, that you care about their child's progress, and that you want to make sure that the work you're doing in counseling is actually effective. So it's a good way to communicate with them that you care and that you see the importance in tracking data. And once you have the behavior information, this one is great. You can do this with individuals too, but it's great for a small group because sometimes it's very eye-opening to see which group members' behaviors change. So for example, if you have a group of 5 students and let's say none of the behaviors are changing in a positive way, then maybe you need to reevaluate your group curriculum and your activities, and you need to make sure that and you need to find out where there's a disconnect and where the students aren't learning the skill or are not properly applying the skill. But let's say 4 out of 5 students have a positive behavior change as indicated on these behavior progress monitoring forms, but 1 student has no change or has decreased, then you can look at it on a case-by-case basis and maybe meet with the parent, meet with the teacher, and figure out how to best support this 1 student. Maybe they need individual counseling, or maybe they need to be in a different group, something like that, or continued services in some other format. But that's good to know when you're doing the group setting. You can kind of compare. You don't want to compare the students to each other. Everyone's on their own counseling journey, but you can kind of see your group's effectiveness if the group itself needs some improvements, like the curriculum, or if it's just something on an individual need that student needs. I hope that makes sense. So that is the second way you can collect small group data, the behavior progress monitoring surveys. Again, you can make these yourself. I have some in my store as well if you want some templates to download. Same with self-assessments. I'll link to both of those in the show notes. But you can also do these digitally. Use Google Forms, and again, it's a great way to organize all the data in one simple place so you can translate it to charts and graphs and then communicate it to your stakeholders, that being your admin, teachers, parents, or if they're older, maybe even the student themselves. So by collecting the small group data, you can really analyze the effectiveness of your small groups and see how you can modify them. And it's okay. Sometimes we don't want to collect the data because we're scared of what the answers are going to yield. And it may be where we find out you did an 8-week small group and it was entirely ineffective and no one progressed. I mean, that's really rare and I doubt that would happen. But that's still valuable information. So even seeing the data you don't want to see or seeing that something's not working is still valuable information, because then you can learn how to edit it and how to change it and how to fix it to help more kids in the future. Okay, and if you like this podcast style and how I kind of walk you through step by step these different assessments and these different activities, and I tell you exactly how I implement things with my students, and I give a lot of examples. If you like that style of learning, then I really think you're going to love my new school counselor membership called Impact. So I was talking about it a little earlier in the episode, but this is a place where you can get all of your small groups, SEL class lessons, and individual activities every month. I send you a variety of these that I've specifically curated for that time in the school year. And they're completely yours to download. But it's not only that, but I'm also giving you implementation guides, video guides where I'm showing you step by step every page of the resource and talking about it. And I give you a curriculum map that's kind of like a lesson plan or strategy guide on how to use it, when to use it, and who to use it with. So if you like listening to the podcast and you like things being explained to you in this way, then I think you're really going to love this resource that I have for you. So I'll link to it in the show notes. So go to stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/impact. So stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/impact. And I'll link to it as well. And that's where you can see the page with all the details on everything that's included. It's my brand new membership. I just launched it yesterday and I'm super excited about it. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. But basically, you're getting all of the curriculum, the lesson plans, video implementation guides. You also get coaching calls with me. So again, if you like this podcast, if you like hearing my suggestions for implementing different things, we're going to do live Zoom calls where you and I can chat and you can ask questions to me, ask questions to other counselors. And there's a community aspect. There's a Facebook group. I know sometimes being a school counselor can feel like you are on your own island. It can be very isolating if you don't have someone to bounce ideas off of. So we also offered that. And in addition, so each month I'm giving you those curated resources specifically designed for that point in time. But I'm also having some resources in there that are like an essential resource library. And these are those resources that I find myself using time and time again throughout the school year for a variety of cases. And there's also some in there for those one-off kind of like emergency style resources, like a grief group or divorce discussion cards, something you might need in a pinch. So those are included as well. So again, you can find all the information, all the details over at stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/impact, and I will link to it in the show notes. Okay, thanks so much, y'all. I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. You can find the links from today's episode in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Rachel, she's on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers at Bright Futures Counseling. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes of School Counseling Simplified. Talk to you next week.